everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Paulette, and today we're going to talk about IVF Part 2, which is the frozen embryo transfer, or FET. So my egg retrieval was in May, and after my egg retrieval, my doctor was like, go home, rest, everything like that, and we'll see you again when your cycle starts again. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll call you. He's like, okay, yeah, call me, but make sure I'll order your medication and pick those up sometime this week so you don't have to worry about it later. And I was like, okay, cool. So I call him. I pick up my medication before I call him, obviously, and I told him my cycle started. He's like, okay, cool. Start putting on 2 patches on your lower abdomen and change them every 3.5 days. So for me, the second day of my cycle was on a Thursday, and I put on in the morning. And I changed it 3.5 days after, so it was like the third day at night, and then going on like that. And then a week after I started those patches, I did a sonogram, and they were like, okay, well, your lining looks good, but we want you to go on a 3rd patch because we want your lining a little more thicker so the baby can stick. Not the baby, but the embryo has more of a chance to stick. And I was like, okay, cool. But when I asked him when we do the transfer, if we can do 2 embryos instead of 1, and he said no, because of my age, the likelihood of me having multiples or the embryo splitting are high. So he didn't want to risk premature birth or damaging the babies in any way and having them be handicapped in any way. So like if he wants to prevent any harm to the embryo and the baby, and so he made a good point to me that day and was like, your goal is to have a healthy baby, not to have a pregnancy. And I thought that was so true. So reality check struck in, and I was like, okay, cool, let's just keep it this way. So I only did 1 because of my age and the likelihood of it succeeding, whatever. 5 days before my transfer, my doctor gave me a little note saying, today, the day 5 days before my transfer, this is the 5 days before my transfer, he's like, start taking doxycycline 2 times a day, morning and at night, and after your transfer, start taking progesterone oil. So the day of my transfer, start taking progesterone oil at night. So like around 6 or 7 nighttime. And I was like, okay, cool. And from what I remember in my injection class about progesterone and oil is that it's called a peanut butter shot, and it has to go into like the muscle. We'll talk more about that later, but whatever. The day of my transfer, I was supposed to take a Valium 30 minutes. Well, when I checked in 30 minutes. They tell you to go in 30 minutes ahead of time anyway, just so you can get there on time and you don't have to stress out about it. I got there 30 minutes early, but I forgot to take my doxycycline. I think it's because I was stressed out about the move, because we were going to move 3 days later, and I've been packing until then. And I stopped the day of the transfer, but that's another story and another ordeal. Anyway, so the transfer, I showed up 30 minutes early. I had a full stomach of water. They want your like bladder really full, and I was on the verge of, the need to pee. So the day of your transfer, you go in 30 minutes early. You take your Valium. I forgot to do that. And you go in, you check in, you go to the little room that you're going to go. The embryologist comes in and talks to you about your embryo and what it looks like and how it's going. So they thaw out your embryo an hour earlier before you come in to make sure that all the cells are still growing and it's still alive after the being frozen. So they thaw it out, and they're like, okay, we're watching it, it's still growing, still looks good. So here's what mine looked like. So this is what it looked like frozen. And down here is what it looked like when it was thawed out. Isn't that cool? And then after that, they, you lay down, you undress from the waist down, and they had this cloth over you, and a nurse is with a sonogram on your stomach, and your doctor's on the bottom. And then on there's two screens. One has like the ultrasound, and then the other one has where the embryo is, and you can see them like going with the needle and then like sucking it up. It's crazy. It's so cool. And then they come in, they give the syringe to the doctor, and you're just laying there watching the screens, and they put it up. The embryologist takes it to make sure that the embryo is gone, because it's that tiny, and they're like, clear, and then they're all done. And then after that, you go home, chill, and try to relax, and start taking your progesterone oil that night. So that goes on. My doctor was like, I'll see you in 10 days to get a blood test. You won't technically see me. I just had to go to the lab to do a blood test. This blood test, I did not feel confident about it. I had a feeling it didn't work, like all the other feelings I've had after my IUIs, like a couple days later, just didn't happen for me. I know it didn't. And then I got the call. I was right. I cried. I eventually got over it because I was trying to think of the positive. Like, now that it didn't work, I can do all the things that I couldn't do before. I can start moving my furniture around the way I like it. I can start putting up frames the way I like it. I can move all the things around my house and organize it the way I like it. It's always good to look at the positives after something bad happens to you, or how you feel about something that's bad that has happened to you. But during that call, my doctor said, if you feel ready to start again, just call me when your cycle starts. And I said, okay. I talked to my husband about it, and we're like, okay, let's do it. Let's save and try again. Luckily, we didn't have to pay as much as the first time, because that doesn't include the egg retrieval. So we just had to pay for the frozen embryo transfer. Same thing goes over, just like the first one. Start patches. Sonogram a week later. This week later, my doctor saw my stomach and was like, that doesn't look good. That doesn't look healthy, because there was a ton of discoloration all over my stomach from the first time. And a ton of discoloration on my stomach. And he was like, do you want to start taking pills? It's the same thing. It's just a little harsher on your liver. Just a little. And it's less convenient than the patches. And I was like, I don't care. Give me these patches. Give me these pills. I don't want these patches no more. I'm sorry, my dog is whining. She's a brat. Oh, Siri, you're a brat. Anyway, so I started taking the pills, and I started taking 3 of them a day. And I kid you not, my lining was a lot bigger, or not bigger, thicker, and looked so much better. I was just so much more happier after, because these patches just stressed me out. So I was just so much more relaxed with the pills. Same thing, 5 days before my transfer, I did a sonogram, and I started the doxycycline 2 times a day, and had more progesterone oil, got more needles and everything. And this time, the only thing I did differently, or a few things I did differently, and because I Googled it up, or Pinterest, how to have a successful frozen embryo transfer, is because I looked up all that. And they're like, eat pineapple, drink a lot of water, keep your feet warm, rest, do things that help you relax. Excuse me. So, second time around, when I showed up 30 minutes early, and we showed up really early because we had to leave from 29 Palms super early to get there. And I got there. I took my Valium this time, 30 minutes before my appointment, like I was supposed to, but I had to pee. I was holding in my pee so long. So I peed, and then they made me drink a whole bunch of water. to make sure that my bladder was full again. It's really important. I'm not 100% sure why, but it's important to have a full bladder during this procedure or whatever. This time I ate pineapples for 3 weeks, so a week and a half before my appointment or my transfer and a week and a half after my transfer. I kept my feet warm. I did yoga, even though yoga gave me a little bit of anxiety, but I'll talk about that later. And so pineapple, water, feet, yoga, keeping your feet warm, and resting. And so here is the embryo from the second time. This is what it looks like. If we can take out this glare. That's what it looked like frozen. And that's what it looked like thawed out. And again, it was like the first one. It was a good, and all the cells were growing and all of that. I'm happy to say that it worked the second time after doing all those things differently. I took a home pregnancy test the day of my blood test, and I didn't look at it. I kept put it to the side. I ran out to go do my blood test, came back home, looked at it, and I was just so excited. I was so happy that it finally worked, that we were gonna have a baby after this. Like, it finally happened. So yeah. So it worked. I kept taking my progesterone oil because they told me to keep taking it until it was 12 weeks. I kept taking my estrace to keep my estrogen up, because those two hormones are important to sustain a pregnancy. And then one night I woke up and I was bleeding. Like, I started my period, like bleeding. I wake up my husband and I was like, we need to go to the emergency room because I'm bleeding. And at this point I'm 5 weeks. My doctor's appointment was in a week. And so we go to the emergency room. They do blood tests. They did a sonogram. And at the end of it, they told me, everything looks fine. The baby's still attached to my uterine wall. My hormones are good. It's just something that happens. Unless like I fill up like a whole pad of blood within like every hour, then I should worry and go to the emergency room. But they said everything is fine. Okay. 3 days later, I start bleeding again. Just as much, but this time it lasted a little longer. The first time it was just like a day, or like for that hour, and then it stopped. But the second time I was bleeding and discharging for about 4 days, and I saw my doctor and I was still discharging. And but when we went to the emergency room the second time, they said there's signs of a heartbeat, still early, but there's signs of a heartbeat and the baby's still there and my hormones are still good, so not to worry, it happens. And finally went to my doctor and they said we saw our little thing. So this is a sonogram right over here of it at 6 weeks. The heartbeat was slow. Sorry for my dog. The heartbeat was slow, but he said that was fine because it's still early. It's not that big of a deal, but it's there. But he wanted to see me a week later. So at 7 weeks I went again. But this time the signs of the heartbeat was slowing down to where when he just ran out of the room. He didn't even give me a sonogram picture like this one. He just ran out of the room. And he's like, I'm sorry, but this is probably going to end up in a miscarriage. And of course your heart breaks because you've been through all of this for so long that you didn't expect it. But it's just something that happens. I know it wasn't my fault. I did everything I could in my power to do whatever, but your mind still goes to like places where you're like, I could have done more, right? Like I could have not gone to yoga because I was reading that, you know, yoga, if you do certain yoga or if you do it too hard, it can lead to miscarriage. And I was like, I'm not doing yoga when I'm pregnant ever again if we try again. But he's like, it's the probability, it's not for sure. And I was like, okay. So I go again at 8 weeks. And this time my husband goes with me because the one time he doesn't come with me, this happens. Anyway, we go the next time, and he said, I'm sorry, but there's no heartbeat. We can see it, but there's no heartbeat. I'm sorry, it's gonna end up in miscarriage. There's a few things we can do. We can let it go, stop taking medication, let it pass on its own. Do a DNC, which is where initially they suck it out of your uterus. And another one where you take medication and you insert it vaginally and it comes all out. So I picked the vaginal insert one, and that night was awful. The worst night of my life. I did not take medication. I kept taking ibuprofen, like 2 ibuprofen, like every time I woke up, which was like every 30 minutes. And I took about 8, I think, or 6 that night. And then when I woke up, I was super sick. I didn't take the pain medication they gave me for a reason. My stomach doesn't sit well. Even if I eat before taking pain medication, it hurts my stomach and I vomit. It's just, I get super dizzy, I get super sick with pain medication, so I'd rather just not take it. So I took ibuprofen because it's good enough for me not to get sick. Although I was still in crazy amounts of pain. Regardless, I'm glad it's over. I'm glad that everything happened. When I asked my doctor why this happened, he said I asked him with both of them, and both of them he had told me the same thing. The first one was most likely it just didn't stick. Second one, something genetically was probably wrong with it, so it didn't survive. And it's okay for me to think that way and to think that, you know, God just didn't want it. God knew that there was something wrong with it, and he didn't want this baby to suffer, so he took it, which is my reasoning for all this and things that keep me sane. So, yeah, I'm sorry for getting emotional, but even though it just happened like 6 months ago, it still sucks. But we decided not to try again after that. Instead, what we're doing is just waiting it out, regaining our mental health, and just detoxing my body from all the medication that I had to take. So detoxing all my body from all the medication that I had to go through. And the only thing I've been taking is my prenatal vitamins, which is doing good things for my hair. It feels thicker, it feels nice, my nails are growing. I feel like my cycle's more on track than it was for years. I do think that doing this, just relaxing and not doing very much right now, has been helpful for us. So I'm pretty grateful for that. And we don't know when we're gonna try again. We're just kind of working on ourselves, mental health, and having fun, just not being parents at the moment. But that's about it. I hope this video helped you. Like, subscribe. I think I'm going to start putting down my social media stuff on the bottom. Mainly just Instagram and Snapchat, because are the 2 major ones that I actually use. So there's that. Have a great new year. Even though it's like the second video that I've done this year. So whatever. Bye. Have a nice day, guys.